your university tries to tackle this sort of challenge. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Renee. If I could invite Gareth Johns, PTS. Thanks, Gareth.
Renee, you're right. Very simple clickers. That's good. So, good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be joining you on what I think is actually a really interesting day, and certainly looking at the agenda and the speakers and the content, it's already shaping up to that. In some respects, I'm quite an act to follow, Rennie, there. Now, we've deliberately posed a question here about whether IT and estates, are they better together? And over the next 20 minutes or so, I shall just reflect on it. It might seem a bit of a rhetorical question, and I do acknowledge that success is a common theme about what's being talked about. But for us at PTS, actually today, we're going to try and reflect on this as a story. And in the words of Aretha Franklin, this is a story about respect. We're going to be covering a few examples, and also highlighting that, as always, there's challenges, and being mindful that actually, more importantly, I'm standing in the way of the coffee break that I want to get to as well. We'll get going. In terms of PTS, I'm sure many of you will be aware of the long-standing relationship that we've had with the sector, and it's one that we're very pleased and very proud of. And it might be through the numerous kind of communications type projects that we've been involved, from strategy through implementation programs. It may also be from the type of work that we've been doing around the data centre spaces, where we've helped the likes of Southampton and their new build, or Cambridge, where we've done some large-scale data centre migration work with them. It could also be from the organisational transformation work that we've been doing more recently with the University of London International Academy. And just to digress for a second, and I've got to get this plug in, my colleague Kuldip Sandhu, he's going to be presenting at UCISA, 4 o'clock session on Wednesday around this, so please come and see him if you're there. He actually gave this presentation at the Gartner IT Expo Symposium last November, and it actually garnered an awful lot of interest, particularly from some international universities, so well worth attending. One area that you may not be aware of with PTS is that a core competency is around IT projects within the built environment, and it's something that we've been doing for over 30 years, which is why we think that we're in a good position to kind of give a view, an independent view around the interfacing between IT and estates and the business on these type of projects. So, first of all, I'd like to talk about King's. And King's is a relatively new client firm for PTS, and we've been working with them for just under 4 years or so. And like most organisations, to try and maintain their position as a leading university, they've commenced a number of major significant estates projects, which have been from refurbishments through to new builds. Unsurprisingly, and this is probably a comment that you'll hear, is that there's been challenges about IT being engaged late on projects, and as a result of that, with a small IT team, actually how can they respond to such projects has always been a challenge, and it gives kind of compromises around impact to both the project and to BAU as well. Now, in 2012, there was a change of leadership at King's, and this brought a new approach. Nick Leake joined as the CIO, and Nick's background is from being in media and broadcast. And similarly, the following year in 2013, a gentleman called Ralph Luck joined Estates and Facilities as their Real Estate Development Director. Now, Ralph, actually, his role prior to that was at the Olympic Delivery Authority, so he was well used to delivering large-scale capital projects and making sure that they were brought in on a deadline. But one of the key things is that both of these gentlemen brought a different approach, and one which actually was really around fostering relationships between IT and estates. One thing that happened quite early in Nick's tenure is something which is relatively simple, which was around putting some rigour about the standards that IT had already been using. So this was putting formality in, it was actually documenting them, so that for the likes of physical infrastructure, fibre, copper, equipment room design, all those kind of things, there was a standard that estates could work to and understand. And similarly, in the audio-visual side, that was fully documented as well. These standards could be used by estates and facilities to assist them on projects, but it always needed to be validated on a project-by-project basis by IT. And also, they ensured, and this was a comment that was made by Roger earlier, it was that they've ensured that on all estates and facilities projects that there actually is engagement of IT as part of that. Now, what's interesting around estates and facilities is that they've got different project managers, they've got different teams that they have in terms of large-scale developments versus refurbishments and so on, and each have their own kind of different ways of working. To talk about the Great Hall on the Strand, I don't know if any of you actually had the chance to see this facility. It's an absolutely fascinating building, and it's gone through a recent refurbishment, and unsurprisingly, this was a really challenging project. For a bit of history, it was built between 1829 and 1831, and Sir Robert Smirke was commissioned for this. One of the reasons being is that actually he did the building next door, which was Somerset House, so they got some uniformity around it. It won't be a great surprise to hear it's a Grade 1 listed building, and as anybody who's worked in those kind of environments knows, that brings with it a whole set of challenges as well. The Great Hall has multiple uses, and one of the key things that they wanted to do was to increase the functionality that they had there, make it a more adaptable and flexible space. And there were a lot of enhancements that IT wanted to make into that space in order to underpin and facilitate that. And one of the key areas was around audio-visual and the AV installation that was there. Now, not only is it a Grade 1 listed building, it's got a Grade 1 listed ceiling, it's got other elements to it which made it a real challenge in terms of how do you get the best experience in there. And elements such as how you deal with the audio, how you put screens up and so on, were really difficult. And from the original design intent that was put out there, unsurprisingly, there were compromises that had to be made. Now, compromises aren't a surprise, but one of the key bits is that IT and estates actually had a common vision for the Great Hall to actually make it as good as they possibly could be. And so for a number of these challenges, they explored multiple ways of doing things until they actually found a right solution, or they ran out of time, or the budget was too great. But it really is classed as a great IT experience down there. Champion Hill is part of King's student accommodation. It's in Dulwich, it's close to their Denmark Hill campus. This redevelopment was completed in 2014, and it's got 714 bedrooms down there. At the heart of it, and we can see the kind of picture at the back of it, is a building called Platanes. Now, this was built in 1882 for a German banker who eventually handed it over to Herman Kleinwort of Kleinwort Benson Bank, for any of you who may be aware of that. But this also became Grade 2 listed in 2009. Again, further challenges around that. The key bit around this project is that it was design and build. Now, for those in estates, you'll be absolutely appreciate what that means. But for those on the IT side, this means that a contractor was appointed to actually design and then build the project for a lump sum price. So rather than it being a route where there would have been input from various consultants to actually get to a point of evolving that design and then the works commencing. So as part of putting together the brief for the D&B, the employees' requirements, the ERs as you'll hear them get referred to, King's IT team was able to clearly state what it was that it wanted, again leveraging those standards that have been defined, and to make sure that that it was absolutely clear to the contractor what it was that they wanted to get out of it. So fundamentally, they were maintaining the standards that they'd put an awful lot of work into defining. And also, it helped estates know that when the D&B contract was being negotiated, there were certain things where compromises couldn't be made. So the dreaded word value engineering, or phrase I should say, value engineering, when that reared its head, estates knew that these were bits that actually they couldn't be, or shouldn't be affected, because otherwise there'd be an impact in terms of IT then taking the campus onto as part of the general IT infrastructure. More recently, there's a really large project that King's is undertaking, which is referred to as the Aldwych Quarter. So for those of you who are familiar with that area of London, and the gentleman from the LSE, I'm sure will be very familiar with it because it's right on his doorstep. There are a number of iconic buildings around in this environment, one of which is Bush House, which is well known as being the home of the BBC World Service for a number of years. And over the next 10 years or so, King's is going to be occupying 4 of those buildings, so Bush House, Strand House, King House, and I think Melbourne House in 10 years' time. But because of this large-scale development, one of the things that they have taken is a holistic approach to the project and a real kind of master planning aspect around actually how do we deliver IT services into and across those buildings, as well as integrating it into the wider King's estate. And there's been, as part and parcel of this, greater understanding and greater consideration to the type of applications that are going to have to be supported by this IT infrastructure. And as far as the network aspect is concerned, well, AV services, they're well established on the network. They already know those, from digital signage through to lecture capture services. And again, just a quick digression. At UCISA, Trevor Baxter from King's will be talking about the work that they've been doing around evolving their lecture capture. Now, it's unknown smack, or a very unknown fact, that Trevor is actually the holder of the world record skateboard high jump, which was established in 1982. Now, a skateboard high jump is exactly what it sounds like. On a skateboard, jump up, and he achieved 5.5 foot. It's pretty impressive. So I'm not sure he could do it quite now, and he openly admits that. But not only AV, but in terms of physical security, so access control, CCTV, this is all coming onto the network, a real common and converged environment. And also, they're starting to explore areas of Internet of Things, intelligent building endpoints. Can these come on? Where is the opportunity? Where's the benefit? And in some respects, I'll make no bones for making what might appear to be an obvious statement, and that this increased kind of convergence does require a lot more closer working between the parties to understand what's the implications of all of these. There's a key point around the life cycle. A building has a greater life cycle than a network. If you're upgrading this, how do you ensure that actually elements of your building infrastructure services actually still operate? For example, this is a world that is slowly coming into the world of IP, and we're looking at projects where they're deploying technologies which have got 10 meg interfaces, 10 meg half duplex interfaces, and so these are things which are already out of date for something that's got a 15, 20 year lifespan, which again is running at a different replacement cycle to an IT network. So understanding the implications of all of these. And, for example, if you take the IT network down for some planned maintenance, how does that affect your CCTV, your security? All of that has got to be worked through and good conversation between the parties. But one of the things that this may well end up with is that we've only really got kind of convergence at an IP level, that we've got to have separate networks to deal with some of these building services, because we know that the speed of service that we're going to have to deliver to from an education side is going to increase quicker than what the building may require. To move on to Keele, and I'll quickly rattle through a number of these. Keele undertook a campus-wide Wi-Fi deployment. This is a project that they started in 2013, and the main objectives there was to really expand the coverage and provide pervasive wireless coverage, improve performance, all those kind of good things. Basically, they've been getting a hammering on social media from their students in terms of the experience that they've been getting. And also, not surprisingly, at the same time, estates had a fairly significant program of refurbishments that was happening across that period. There was a good outset to the project in terms of estates being a key part of that project board. So Roger, actually, in this one, it was the other way around, that it was IT leading, but estates were very much a kind of a key part of it. And so that early engagement was established. Now, it did go through a little bit of a lull as the IT side went through its procurement cycle. And as a result of that, there were certainly probably some opportunities that were lost to ensure that estates really understood why this was being driven and actually what was really required in terms of the speed at which this project needed to move. There was also some interesting dynamics around working with estates, and again the way they structured their teams and the different style of operations that certain project managers had, in terms of ones that were very clear and concise, and others where they were looking for a more informal kind of arrangement. Interestingly, estates thought that the timescales that IT were working to were unrealistic. But IT actually had said, well, they may be, but we've got to do it. The students are demanding this. This is absolutely kind of key for us. So the kind of ultimate or the key aspects around this was that there had to be an awful lot of cooperation and, more importantly, coordination across the two groups to schedule the works. Because, unsurprisingly, areas that were being refurbed were also ones where installation work was going to have to happen. So there was good coordination between the two groups to ensure that they were kind of only hit once, to try and make sure that those disruptions were kept to a minimum. Unsurprisingly, the asbestos register that was there, and there was one, which was a good start, was actually found to be incomplete. So as the project started and the installation works went into the site in terms of their pre-planning, they'd find that actually we've got some issues. So as a result of that, there needed to be some float in the programme in terms of other buildings that they could go to. Now, that was great at the outset, where there were a lot of places to go. But as we kind of got to the middle of the programme, that got a bit more compressed, and that opportunity to go somewhere else became a bit more challenging. And in kind of response to this, one of the things that estates did was that they improved their process for dealing and assessing this. Whereas at the outset of the project, it had been around about 6 weeks, they brought it down to days. Now, that meant that actually things could keep on track, and it was a really, really positive change from estates. And ultimately, the new Wi-Fi service went live on schedule, which was, in terms of the project outcome that IT wanted, that was it. A couple of quick comments around Reading. And again, some of these opening statements won't be a surprise, that ITS found that they were often being asked to install IT services into buildings that were just getting up to be almost complete, projects that they had no awareness of. And as a result of this, costs were normally higher than they would be, because additional kind of retrofit works had to be done. For ITS, with them not being aware of it, it could have affected their capacity planning around the network and infrastructure. And more importantly, as far as ITS are concerned, that put them in a bad light, because they're often perceived as being, again, to echo one of Roger's phrase, a blocker, a hindrance in terms of, you're late for doing this, you're going to have an impact on this project. So one of the things that at the time it was Mike Roach and Hilary Vine, they did was they actually took a proactive step of funding a role within ENF to actually deal with all that coordination, to make sure that ITS was at the table. So anything that was going on, they were aware of. Now, practically, it meant that the design authority for anything still sat with ITS, but actually the planning, the commissioning, the executing of it stayed with estates and facilities. This operated in this mode for about 18 months before that role was picked up by estates and facilities, and it was normal procedure for them. And I think it was Dave Young who was doing that down at Reading until he retired last year, actually. And that model has actually set a bit of a blueprint for subsequent ones that have built upon that and made sure that ITS was, that the IT elements have been successfully delivered. Durham. Durham's been a client of PTS for a number of years, and we've been supporting the university and CIS with an IPC upgrade project, which was actually part of a wider core infrastructure project that it undertook. The procurement phase of that project was actually back in 2008. Now, I appreciate this makes this a bit of a whiskered reference, but it's quite an interesting one, and hopefully you'll see why. Not only did we have this whole-scale IPC upgrade project, but there was also a brand new iconic building that was going up, or planned to go up at the same time, called the Palatine Centre. And a bit like all kind of good tales, there's a bit of a plot twist. The core of the university's telephony network, along with its switchboard services, was located in a discrete building called North Lodge. Now, this building was right in the corner of the footprint for that new building, and it had to be demolished before that could actually progress. So, as the IPT project moved into the implementation phase, one of the things that they ensured was that, again, there was representation from estates and buildings as a senior user on the project board. So, estates and buildings were saying, we've got this landmark project, this needs to be going ahead, this building needs to come down. But at the same time as being part of this project, they understood, well, it's not quite as simple as that. There are all these enabling works, there's all these dependencies that we have to do from a CI as part of the CIU project before we can even get there. So this could be viewed as an element of incentivization for estates and buildings that in order for them to complete their project, they would have to do anything that CIU kind of wanted. But actually, it turned into a much more respectful working relationship. I won't be spoiling the end of the story by saying that actually the milestone was hit, the services were migrated in the summer of 2009, and that the North Lodge was then demolished. And it certainly wasn't a minor undertaking, because that serviced 40% or so of the university's telephony estate. Now, this sounds somewhat embarrassing to say that actually it was only at the beginning of last month that IPT project actually completed. Now, yes, that's over six years since North Lodge was knocked down. But one of the kind of key things around that is that in the years that followed, in the following 1 or 2 years after North Lodge, there was a lot of momentum behind the project, which was supported by E&B to actually make that implementation, make that upgrade happen. And that was a really kind of positive aspect to it. There was just a number of other aspects which meant that it took a little bit longer to get it finally over to completion. A couple of quick pictures. That's North Lodge. Demolition did start. It was on a cliff, and you can see there that actually this is some of the groundwork preparations that was done. So it really did have to kind of come down. And then, just hours later, it had gone. As we know, it's not all sweetness and light in these projects, and it would be naive to think that everything always goes well. And we're all experienced to know that that's not the case. And there are a number of challenges. So I'm going to pick up on a few from this, and these are ones that are something that we see kind of time and time again, unfortunately, that the setting of project budgets actually is a real challenge, because one of the things that we find is that they're done by construction cost consultants who will be working on old models. They haven't really updated themselves to actually factor in new IT technologies and so on. And they work on the basis of generally of a cost per square foot, which means that there are certain things that can be wildly inaccurate in terms of if it's a relatively small space but it's got a high, for example, audio-visual aspect to it. That would be that could get missed completely. And as I say, in instances like that, we do find that AV is often the biggest casualty. Opportunities can get missed in terms of enhancements to teaching and learning and other IT aspects that they may want to be put in. And fundamentally, this means that the project gets off to, it starts off on the wrong foot. Now, don't get us wrong, we're not saying that there shouldn't be an unlimited budget. That would be nice if there was, and we're realistic to know that that's not the case. But what there should be is early engagement to make sure that that budget is realistically set, and that there is an understanding in all parties as to what is key, what's important, to make sure that that can get reflected. Design and build, D&B, or done to a budget, as it's also kind of commonly referred to. This has an awful lot of challenges with it in terms of it's one chance to get it right because of the way that those type of projects work. So I talked about the King's Champion Hill project. One of the good things there was that they were able to input very clearly and concisely up front in terms of actually what those requirements were, and that helped that project to be a success. But if that isn't done, then there can be an awful lot of challenges in terms of actually what that construction company does. And we see this when we've been engaged on the other side of the fence, that actually IT has been defined, but it's just been defined as cabling. Okay, well, it's a design and build contract, which means everything needs to get delivered. So where's AUV? Where's the active network? Where's the active Wi-Fi? All those aspects. And as a result of this, IT standards can end up getting compromised. So changes are going to be costly to this because they're always dealt with as a variation. And there's also the question of actually who's going to be picking up those costs. Is it estates? Is it IT? Where is it? And that's one of the kind of key things where there's a bit of a challenge around understanding in terms of who means, what does IT mean to people? Is it cabling? Is it network? Is it everything? And unfortunately, sometimes elements can get overlooked because there is a lack of understanding between them. Now, Roger will be pleased because I'm getting the sign already that we're just about to bring this to a close. So there are kind of a couple of key points around this, and again, they're not going to be a great surprise. That actually, when IT and estates work together, it actually can be a really powerful combination for a great project outcome. And one of the things that we've already heard, and we'll kind of continue to hear it, I guess, throughout the day, is that before and during projects, that actually there needs to be that clear and regular communication between the parties to really understand what is important to each. We found that documented IT standards can help with the projects, but again, they shouldn't just be used in isolation by estates. There needs to be that validation. When that discussion stops, there can be problems, and they're often expensive to correct. And certainly one of the things that we're seeing is that actually with the next wave of convergence in terms of IoT elements, intelligent buildings, that increased need for cooperation, that's just going to continue. I'm going to finish with an acrostic, and if you come and see us in the refreshment room, you'll see this is one of our banners. And again, it kind of brings us back to Aretha, which is, very quickly, REBA. So some of you may know what REBA means, some of you may not. It's the Royal Institute of British Architects, and they have a plan of work, which is how construction projects get executed. So estates love their acronyms as much as IT do, but it's kind of useful for each party to know some of the kind of key aspects. As far as IT is concerned, you've got to acknowledge that estates are going to be a key stakeholder in a lot of your projects. Ultimately, and this goes back to one of the comments that Rennie was making, this is all about improving the student experience. So we shouldn't be forgetting that that's who it's for. It's not an IT project, it's not an estates project. The outcome is a better student experience. Estates isn't better than IT, IT isn't better than estates. There should be a peer balance to this working relationship. Clear expectations have got to be set. One element around that has got to be that continuous communication. And again, from an estates aspect, technology is always going to be part of your projects. You cannot get away from it. It's going to be part of it. You're going to have to embrace it. So I am slightly over time. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we can take them now, or I guess in the coffee break.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, more than happy.
Thank you very much.